Hi, this is Dr. Shannon Wong Lerner, host of The Intersection, where diverse folks converse. Created by and for queer people of color and gender nonconforming people, The Intersection is curated side by side with some of the most brilliant and fascinating minds in our community. I create these programs keeping in mind all of the things that aren't said and all of the things that we aren't able to talk about within heterosexual and cisgendered produced shows. In The Intersection, you'll find firsthand what the leading voices of our community are thinking, the work they're producing, the concerns they have, and what they hope for us and what they leave behind in their legacy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, my name is Dr. Shannon Wong Lerner, and you're here with The Intersection, Diverse Folx Converse. You're here with Season 2, Episode 3. The title of our episode is Why I Won't Give Up on Anyone, How to Create Unlikely Queer Straight Coalitions During the Holidays. And we're here with our special guest that we're so pleased to have, Steve Petersen, who's the founder of Bursting Through Movement. He's the host and facilitator of Bursting Through Stories and the creator of the Bursting Through Storytelling process. Hi, Steve. We're so happy to have you here today.
Hi, Dr. Shannon. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So typically this is the time where we talk just a little bit about how we came to this topic and sort of like our mutual investment in talking about what we're going to talk about today. And so we came to this topic because I was really interested in Steve's work with Bursting Through and this idea that there is a bridge or there's a transition that's happening between queer and straight people was really exciting to me. You know, I've been someone who throughout my life in, whether it's the corporate world or whether it's in academia, has been surrounded with people who I always hope to be allies of mine and sometimes were and sometimes weren't. Yeah. But I always wish that there was this conversation that could be had between me and other queer people, other people of color, and the people around me who potentially could be allies. And I feel like Steve is really working hard to bridge that gap. Did you want to say anything sort of about how we came to this topic?
Yeah. And I mean, that was so very well said. And there's so many things you said that are right there in the core of Bursting Through. And, really it's about that shared humanity. Bursting Through is about that shared humanity. And it's interesting whether you're talking like professional relationships or personal relationships, it's like we just don't talk about them. And like I came from the corporate world too. It's like I spent 27 years, in corporate retail, some huge companies. And, it's like there's diversity and inclusion departments or diversity departments, that are incredibly well-intentioned, but it's like they're in the time that we're in now and like the 2020s, it's like, it's not enough just to have like a picnic or a pride day or,
sure.
It's like, those things are great, but it's like, let's have a conversation about how we can function better as a team. And that's not about going to happy hour.
Yeah. And I also think, there's something that can be said about bursting through and its creativity. When I think about my own time in different environments, like when I got my master's degree and I was teaching in an engineering university, it was primarily, white men from, sometimes I was the only woman or the only person of color in the room. And I had to figure out also, like, how do I teach some of these concepts that have to do with diversity and inclusion in a way that will cross over to what is known and lived for my audience, essentially. And the reason why, we had the title of like not giving up on anyone, I was actually thinking about it on the way here in my car. And I was thinking about, sometimes I have these like very difficult interactions with people, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. And there is an instinct and kind of a knee-jerk reaction to just sort of be like, and I've heard this before, like that is a garbage person, right? So which is, I guess, sort of an insult to people that take out garbage, but like this idea that like this person should be thrown away
Right.
because it's too difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
And I think one of the many values of what you do is that you don't have that attitude, right? And we're going to talk more about sort of like your positionality that affords you to be able to do this work. I think for now, I'd really love, as a starting place, just to hear about what is the mission of Bursting Through organization, that maybe you can just explain to us, like a short synopsis of that.
Yeah, and I would do that, but I do want to just comment on something that you just said. When we talk about, like, to use that term, like garbage, person,
Mhm.
and I do want to be really clear that it's like the Bursting Through talks to the straight community as much, if not more, than the queer community.
Yes. And
Also,
that's something I definitely want to talk about
yeah,
too, because I think that's fascinating as
yeah,
well.
yeah, so I mean, so many things going on. Ultimately, Bursting Through's goal is to create the largest library of queer straight relationships ever known to man. And once that library exists, and that's what we're starting to do by gathering these stories and putting them out there, through every media channel we have. It's like our shared humanity becomes undeniable. And Bursting Through has and I have a ongoing column in Las Vegas Pride magazine, right, which publishes every couple months, and I'm very, very proud of that. But ultimately, I feel that Bursting Through does its best work when it's picked up and published, in more mainstream publications. Like, I grew up in Iowa, and the Des Moines Register has been incredibly kind.
Section focuses on queer people of color, gender nonconforming people. And so, when I brought you on, I really was thinking about that. It's like, how does this straight or this queer straight alliance, these relationships, these stories, how can this help, queer people of color and gender nonconforming people? And one piece that you brought to me that was really interesting, and you had said this in a previous conversation, is a lot of people now that are sort of on the alt-right have a different way of dressing. I don't know what it was like. Where were you brought up?
I grew up in rural Iowa.
Oh, you did? Okay. So I don't know where I was brought up in Sacramento, there were actually neo-Nazis in full regalia just like walking down the street for a while until they got driven out by this other group called Sharp, Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice. So then they got driven out, right? But the interesting thing to me is that, that's highly offensive. I remember there was like a skinhead in my social studies class, and
Right.
I actually made him cry. That's when I realized I had this ability to engage in this way. I did it out of love, though, because I had known him before he got into that group.
Right.
But the reason why I'm bringing that up is that, in our time, and I'm not sure what it was like where you were brought up, but in terms of subcultures and things like that, things were out in the open in a different way, right? And the costume was very, obvious. It's like, okay, you are a neo-Nazi. It may or may not have like the swastika. You have the shaved head, and you're wearing the whole thing right now. The flight jacket, the Doc Martens with the white laces or red laces.
Right.
But now there's like a different costume, right? It's like the khaki pants and the polo shirt. And I remember you made this comment that really stuck with me in terms of storytelling and a vivid image, that you had kind of looked in the mirror and you were like, oh my God, I look like one of them, right? But you're not, obviously. But there's something really interesting there for me when you said that. I was like, so Steve knows who he is. You have this whole background with like Fortune 500s as an advertising and media person. And, you come from this whole other world, and you're able to communicate to people in a different way than perhaps me or someone else who does diversity, equity, inclusion, and focuses maybe on allyship, but there is less of a focus on, kind of like talking to straight people. Like, there is a benefit in that for all of us. I'd love to hear, your thoughts on that, or even that moment when you looked at the mirror, you were like, oh my God, I look like one of them, right?
Yeah.
And then you had to come to terms with that and figure out, like, what does that mean?
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's really interesting, and it's good that you remembered that. Okay, so when Trump got elected, I was living in San Francisco. I had just moved from New York, right? And you know, like many, gay people or queer people, it's like, that was, not a not a fun night for us, right?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's like, so I immediately kind of turned to, it's like, what can I do as we're searching, right?
Yeah, I was
And,
too.
so it's like, so I, tried to find some substantial thing, and I joined a couple groups, and I joined, the Love Army, which is, and out in the Bay Area. And anyway, one day, and when I look in the mirror, I mean, I see me, but it's like I see a wounded gay man.
Yeah.
Right? I see a damaged gay soul, right?
Mm.
And so for the longest time, I didn't see anything but that.
Yes.
And one day I am in Cisco, and I was out running errands one afternoon, like one Saturday afternoon. It was right after all this happened with the election. And there had been a lot of, chatter in groups about like how to identify as a safe person. And I'm like, well, I don't need that. I'm Steve. I'm gay.
Yes. Sure.
Right? And so I'm like out walking on the street, and I'm like walking up a hill because it's San Francisco, and I see some women that were, of Muslim faith,
Mm-hmm.
and they noticed me, and they crossed the street.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I happened to be kind of in a, like how storefronts have reflective surfaces.
Sure.
I looked over, and I was like, my gosh, they're scared of me.
Yeah.
I'm like a 6 foot white dude.
Yeah, sure.
And even though I'm not dressed, like I don't have the uniform. I'm not in khakis and a golf shirt.
Sure.
But to them, it's all the same. And so I'm like, okay, what was that? Safety pins, so that you're safe.
Yeah.
And I went into Walgreens and bought a big bucket of safety pins, and started putting them on everything. And I know a lot has happened since then, but it's like that was a really enlightening moment for me, because I was like, I really realize, I think that was the beginning of my journey of realizing that the package that I'm in,
yes,
is nothing but dumb luck and genetics.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. Actually, the episode we did right before yours, which was with Dr. Karma Chavez, we actually talked about the exact thing you're talking about, with an art piece that was about miscegenation and someone looking genetically at their blackness as compared to a lot of other white people's blackness genetically. And this artist, Adrian Piper, had kind of turned it back to them, or to,
Right.
basically to white people. And like, if this is true, if genetically we are the same, it questions what race is itself and identity, then what are you going to do about it? And I remember that's something that you had brought up too, with the, it seemed like it sounds like, even though you kind of, your internalized side of this wounded, gay man, is that you also recognize that to someone else who comes from a marginalized background that's different than yours, they see something else because they don't know, right? They're like scared of you.
Right.
And so there is that questioning of like, using a responsibility you didn't know you had, right?
Yeah.
And then also, I think the way you treat potential straight allies, in that same way, you put that responsibility back on them. Can you talk a little bit more about that, of some DEI projects or efforts, is that it puts it back on people of color, it puts it back on queer people, and then there's a separation of like them and other, right? And rather than putting the obligation, the responsibility on all of us to act.
I've always, in the retail world, in the fashion world, I have always worked for women.
Mm-hmm.
And, almost exclusively, with a few notable exceptions. But, and it's like in New York at one time, somebody, a female executive, expressed concern that she was scared of me, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, why? And it's like, and I was like, that was shocking too. And I had to look at myself, and it's like,
Sure.
okay, well, I guess my size can be intimidating. I didn't think about that,
Yeah.
but anyway, I'm totally off topic, but the, it's like the responsibility too. It's like, looking in the mirror and like putting myself out front. And it's like, in realizing that, I have some skills, and I have this unique ability to be able to storytell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And packaged in a way that I can get multiple different groups to listen, right?
Yes. You're about midway through the Intersection Diverse Folx Converse podcast. I wanted to take a moment to let you know why I created the Intersection. It was because I didn't see a lot of representation of the most brilliant and creative minds in our communities. All I saw were misrepresentations in popular culture and the media. So I wanted to provide a free and accessible outlet for us all to enrich our lives and to provide meaning for the things that we experience every single day. None of us get paid for the Intersection, and this is not a income generating endeavor for any of us. We do this because we want to add to our culture and we want to add to your lives. So we just ask that you participate as well and contribute to us through subscribing to our channel and leaving reviews and telling your friends and telling the community. Put it up on web boards, share it in social media, tell people about us. But really, subscribing, adding the reviews to Dr. Shannon Wong Lerner's YouTube channel, which houses the Intersection, to the Intersection on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, is really the best way to let other people know about us and to help us increase our visibility so we can increase yours. Thank you so much, and you can now return to the show, and thank you for listening. Maybe you could tell me a story about some people you've reached. And actually, we can even refer to the article too,
Oh, sure, yeah.
because something that I thought was really interesting, you see this happening a lot of time on Facebook or different social medias. People will say their birthday, or for weddings, people say instead of giving them gifts, they want you to donate to these different foundations, right? And so you did something very similar, is that you had a party, your 50th birthday, and then you had a fundraiser for the Matthew Shepard Foundation, which is wonderful. But there was also this sort of like a call to action in this article for straight people to kind of like, and we've spoken about this too before, and I'd love for our audience and our listeners to hear more about it, to kind of put it on the line of like, and I saw a meme on this recently. It's like, if you say you love me, but then you just supported someone who hates me, right, or is trying to annihilate me or annihilate my rights. And you've kind of said that too, is you'll like confront people. You're able to do that. People who are your friends or your family or, allies to a certain degree, but they don't kind of go all the way with it. There's not that follow through. And you give some very simple ways in the article for people to give back. But I also think like a conversation we had that I thought was really interesting, and it was hard for me. I struggled with it, but that's why I have my guests on, is I want to struggle, and for the audience to struggle, and maybe for you to struggle as we're talking about these things, as you were talking about. And that's why we said, like, you don't give up on anyone. That's part of the title, is that you had said that there were some people who are like these like bro dudes or whatever you want to call them who would say to each other like, oh, that's gay, or or
Yeah.
maybe even use like the word fag or something like that, and you're like, hey, you can't say that, and they're like, oh, it doesn't mean that, it's just what
Yeah.
we say. It's like, no, you really can't say that. And just the simple act of making them aware that they can't do that and that they stop this crossover, this homophobia, misogynist thing, right?
Yeah.
Like calling someone a bitch or so, I don't know. Like to me, that's a homophobic thing too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was triggering for me because I was like, I would have a hard time being around those people. But at the same time, I probably have, like when I worked in the engineering school or in other situations, I probably have. And there were ways that I dealt with it. But the idea that you're causing change at that level to me is really fascinating. And I'm wondering if maybe you could talk about like, what are the levels of actionable steps that you give people, and how can you tell what they are? And what do you think the benefit is of giving that, like for people like me or my audience who are queer people of color and gender nonconforming people?
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack. So
I know. Sorry, it's
no,
got
no, no, no,
very
no.
long.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to unpack it for a little bit. So,
Sure.
First, so one of the ways, or the way that this kind of came about, I came to this conclusion of starting to talk to people in this way, was one of the things that Bursting Through was missing, and I was developing, and I was already a published columnist, and getting some traction as a storyteller, but was for lack of a better word, a manifesto, right? And so I wrote a manifesto, right? It was like what Bursting Through is going to do, and so the title of it was called "It's Past Time for Straight People to Come Out," and it talks and it's because it's a 500-word opinion piece, and
Sure.
So it gets right to the heart of it, and it basically says, hey, I'm a gay man. You could easily not know me. You could easily not have me in your life. But that is not, that cannot be my experience with the straight community. And then it goes on to talk about how 55% of the adult straight population in the United States identifies as a queer ally, as an LGBTQ ally. And that was really enlightening to me, because I'm like, okay, then I'm going to talk to them because I think because they need to do more.
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
And also, okay, so if we're 5.6 of the adult population identifies as queer, if 55% of the adult population identifies as a queer supporter, and I am by no means good at math, that's 60-some%.
Yes.
Okay, but yet it's 2021, and there's been more anti-LGBTQ laws passed in this country than in any other year in the history of this country.
And many of those are transgender too.
Yeah, but it's like, but it just doesn't add up.
Sure.
And so, like, part of my personal journey, which is, can't be untied from Bursting Through, is living this authentic life, and no longer being able to accept people who say yes and do no.
Yes.
Right?
So how do you break that down for them? Because politics can get very abstract and people get confused and people want to say the right thing, but maybe they don't really think it. How do you kind of put them on the line so it can be actionable for them, so in a way that is manageable for them?
Yeah.
Right?
So here's what I do. And it's like, and Bursting Through is never intended to be political. It's about storytelling.
Sure.
But unfortunately,
but I mean, just talking about queerness is very political for some people.
Tied to politics.
Yeah.
So you can't separate the two. But that being said, it's like when, I basically, Bursting Through is about giving people easy to digest information and not telling them what to do with it. Right? So like you were saying, I've said this to you, there are Bursting Through members that would self-identify everywhere from redneck to woke and everything in between. And that is that is awesome and that's amazing to me, and I am nothing but honored about that. But so there are a lot of conservative people in my life who say they love me, and sometimes they're people I grew up with, sometimes they're people I collected along the way, and totally believe in support gay marriage and queer rights and marriage equality and everything, but yet vote conservative. Mm-hmm. And what Bursting Through does, and what I can do, is, again, I'm not telling anybody what to do or how they should vote or what they should believe. But what I'm doing is I'm giving them simple, easy to digest facts, like there's been more anti-LGBTQ laws passed, and also explaining that
what that does to people too,
right.
Probably.
And there was a time, and certainly in my age group and in my lifetime, there was a time where you could say something like, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social liberal.
Sure.
That time has passed.
Yeah.
And people of my generation and my age, there's a lot of them that still want to say that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, but what Bursting Through does, through the power of storytelling, and and also it's like social media graphics and stuff is also storytelling, is gives them these little easy to digest facts where it's like, that's just no longer the case. I mean, there's two major political parties in the country, and one has a pro-queer platform and one has an anti. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And
I remember a time when people could say that more freely, that economic conservative socially or fiscally, and then socially liberal, right? Something, that I heard recently is that the country is going much more toward a sort of populist, nationalist. There's a wave of it, right? And that's, I think, how Trump got elected in the first place. When that happened, I remember I was sitting in my living room and it was like surreal. Like I couldn't believe it happened, but it created a shift in me because I also realized that all my friends and I, and probably most of the people I know, we were living under this horrible bubble, right? In this echo chamber, because I was more of an active academic at the time.
Yeah.
And just thinking like all the years I spent teaching, even though I feel like I have a pretty open, style and method that is inclusive of everyone, including people who don't think like me. But I started to really think about it, like the way we're teaching them, the curriculum, I was like, we failed. That was my feeling. It was this huge heartache and this kind of drop in my stomach. I was like, all this time I've been spending as a wordsmith within academia and the theory and all this, philosophy and the humanities, I felt like I had failed because it didn't cross over. And there was a group of people that were so dissatisfied and disconnected from how we were teaching in academia or wherever, that they had to go through these classes, that they turned to Trump, right? Yeah. And it made me think a lot about, that's one reason why I'm so interested in Bursting Through and what you do too, is because and it's one of the reasons why I took a step back from academia. Is like, I want to make more of a difference within my community, but in a way that is accessible to everyone. Right. And it seems like you make LGBTQIA and you make queerness and our rights and our needs and the kind of humanism accessible.
Yeah, I am trying, and thank you. That's a big compliment. And one of the things, and because bringing up Trump, my first published article is called "The Love of Hate." Mm-hmm. It's also Bursting Through in Steve's keynote, right? Mm-hmm. And there's many things that Bursting Through can do in person, but it's like that's the most powerful one in my opinion. And the love of hate it's a term that I've always lived with that I thought was common, and then I was told that perhaps it was something that I made up. But so the love of hate is that look that the hater gets in their eyes when they're having that joy of hating you and telling you that you should not exist in their world, that you should not exist in any world.
Yeah.
And if there's glee in their eyes. And so
sounds
like,
terrifying. It sounds
right,
really
you know, it's
scary
like
to me.
if you were in, I'm sure you've seen it. Like if it was a TV show or something like,
Yeah.
you know, or a movie, it would be that moment that, you know, the demon's eyes flash red.
It sounds like how a serial killer is when they kill, or a sociopath or something.
And it's like, and I'm not making it, well, I mean, it is, I've seen the look, but where the love of hate article takes in the keynote and the journey is that it's like, it starts with talking about how as queer people, we have this ability to take that hate and turn it back in and recycle it into love. But it goes on to talk about the first time I experienced the love of hate. And, you know, I saw it through all, you know, junior high school, through all of high school, you know, the first time I felt real danger of it was, you know, being at a kegger, you know, and having one of those love of hate people who loved catching me out on the road on my own. And I was pretty sure, you know, I was going to get my fag ass beaten.
Yeah.
And then, you know, luckily somebody kind of came by, and it was a friend of my brother's who was kind of tough and just said, leave him alone, you know, and kind of ended the whole thing. But the journey, and the reason I talk about love of hate and why it relates to Trump is that it's like, as my life changed and, you know, I grew up and my career took off and all of this stuff, and I moved to bigger places and bigger cities, you know, I started seeing the love of hate less, right? And I guess to some degree, you know, I, you know, turned my love of hate radar way down. I don't think I ever turned it off. But so one day I'm in Manhattan, right? In my great little studio apartment in Midtown East, and I turn on the TV, and this is, you know, during the primaries, and they're like showing a Trump rally.
Yeah.
And they're talking to his supporters, and every single person they talked to had the love of hate in their eyes.
Yeah.
Right? They were so gleeful and joyful talking to this reporter about, you know, how they don't like Hispanics and immigrants.
Sure.
And, you know, I mean, there was nothing off limits, and they were having a great time.
Yeah.
And that was another like huge moment of clarity for me, where I was like,
can I ask you something?
Yeah,
I hope it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think it's really the hate, or do you think it's just being part of a conversation? That was kind of the feeling I had, like when I was disappointed. I was like, we have been leaving people out of the conversation. Like my friends and I in academia and as professors or instructors, like there's a fraction of people that are just like, F you. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't want to understand. I don't think like that. I don't speak like that. And I'm not talking about diversity, equity stuff most right now, or critical race. I'm talking about just like language and like trying to speak a certain way. I'm curious about that, because I feel like there's been a huge group of people who have been left out of the conversation. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm curious if that's where that might come from, is like the joy of just being able to narrate something, the joy of being able to connect, to relate, to have community, to come out, even if it's like very bigoted, just to be able to like have that you know, because Trump did empower people to do that, right? To be bigoted.
Yeah. But I know, no, it's like on that, I do not think that it is about their pain of being left out, because this way predates, you know, me experiencing love of hate way predates anything Trump related.
Okay.
And there's a look in the eye, and, you know, I might be making it a little more dramatic, but it's not I mean, it's like, there's a look that you can see in people's eyes when they hate you and they're okay with it.
I mean, I've seen that look. I don't want to go into detail. I've seen that look on a personal basis, like having an argument with a partner and you feel like someone's going to hit someone, and it's really scary. and I think I'm relating to it at that level.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about what you're talking about in terms of, I guess, like,
Yeah. See, because it's like, I understand what you're saying, that there are some people who feel like they've been left out of the conversation, and some of us are, talking over them, and, the flyover state thing, and, all of that. But it's like, but I come from there,
sure.
and, it's like, I also think there's a certain amount of personal responsibility, that it's like, I think that what you're talking about is that, for me anyway, it's about their fears were being played on. And that's different than what I'm talking about.
And they were being manipulated. So maybe that's something
Right.
different.
Because it's like, I remember, like, Iowa was one of the first few states to legalize same-sex marriage before it was national. And which is very progressive, right?
Yeah.
Because, and I do truly believe, and I don't know all the analytics or statistics, but I truly believe that a lot of that is because Iowa and places in the Midwest and rural places are very much founded on this principle of live and let live. But to me, it's like, somewhere along the lines, live and let live, like, right-wing conservative groups took live and let live and made people fearful of it. Meaning that it's like, that meme that goes around a lot about, like, somebody else having civil rights is not less for you, it's not pie.
Yeah.
I convinced people that, gay marriage was, people started out with, well, live and let live, right? And then it turned into making them scared of live and let live, because that was infringing on your life somehow. I don't know. That is just a theory. And we might be a little...
I think we're getting a little off topic. That's okay. I just want to thank Steve Petersen as our special guest for episode 3 of season 3. And the title of our episode is Why I Won't Give Up on Anyone, How to Create Unlikely Queer Straight Coalitions During the Holidays. And thank you so much. Please look at YouTube and look at our description for Steve's links for Bursting Through. And also I want to mention, please subscribe and please like on YouTube and your various podcast channels, The Intersection Diverse Folx Converse, because it helps with our visibility. We also have a GoFundMe page for production costs only. The Intersection Diverse Folx Converse is a not-for-profit project for queer people of color and gender nonconforming people. And so we welcome your help to help us with our production costs. Neither Steve or I or anyone on the Intersection who appears as a guest or host will receive any of these funds. They go purely to production costs. Thank you again, Steve, so much for coming on and just spending some time with us.
Thanks for inviting me and talking. And I always enjoy your company. And we got off on a tangent or two. That's okay.
It's okay. Thank you so much, Steve. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. All right. Take care.
You've just finished an episode of the Intersection Diverse Folx Converse podcast. I'm so happy that you decided to join us and you finished the whole podcast to hear all about the stories and lives and the experiences of our guests. I would like to just offer you right now an opportunity to continue to listen to us. You can always find us here at Anchor under the Intersection, Diverse Folx Converse, Folx Folx, or you can find us on YouTube under Dr. Shannon Wong Lerner, LERNER, YouTube channel. We also have a Facebook page, also under the Intersection, Diverse Folx Converse, that you're welcome to join to find out all about upcoming episodes and guests. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.